In this last section, we're going to talk about the new way to be thinking about cancer screening moving forward. And we've already talked about kind of the way we are now. And I think at a bare minimum, we need to do whatever the recommendations are, albeit they are vulnerable to miss people because they are based on population health, which we've talked about. There is a very exciting technology that has come online in the last maybe 18 months that we want to present to the listener so that you can think about this and potentially have conversations with your physician to see if this makes sense for you to overlay on top of the current population-based recommendations. Jen, tell us about the Gallery test.
So this is so exciting. You and I have both done it.
Yes. It is scary.
I was, during the waiting period,
Sweaty
you're like,
palmed.
oh my goodness. But
Yeah.
Anyway, so Grail is the company, and they have this wonderful test called Gallery, and it's a simple blood test. I've drawn it on several of our patients, our members. 2 vials of blood. Takes about 5 minutes. You don't have to fast, which is amazing, but it tests for 50 plus different cancers, which is amazing.
How's that possible?
Well, our cells actually secrete DNA into our bloodstream, healthy cells as well as cancer cells. So what this blood test is doing, it's basically a biopsy of your blood, if you will, but it looks for abnormal DNA cells in your bloodstream, specifically cancer cells. And with a high level of accuracy, and it takes probably about 10 days for this whole test to come back, so there's a little bit of a waiting period, but with a high level of accuracy, not only does it detect cancer cells in your blood, but it also points to what we call a signal of origin. So it can basically tell us, if a positive test does come back, where is the cancer. So we're not spinning our wheels and wasting time doing some imaging tests that are fruitless because we're just kind of chasing this cancer down. We can pinpoint exactly where it's coming from, which is super exciting.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that these cancer-based DNA particles kick off a particular signal. These algorithms that this company uses to identify these, what they call cancer signals, which are particular DNA sequencing, because all cancer behaves very similarly.
Yeah.
And it's these signals, these patterns that the technology is picking up that normal non-cancerous cells don't behave this way, so that would not be a signal. And these cancer signals can then also give you a highly likely tissue of origin to give you some kind of marching orders as start here, like the red X, like start here. What are the benefits, Jen?
Well, as we talk about in a lot of our podcasts,
Like, why would we do that? Like,
we want to be on offense.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want to be defensive when it comes to things that take people off the planet. So if you listen to our heart disease podcast, it's one of my favorites that we just did. It's really rooted in being offensive with everything related to heart disease, and it's no different with cancer. You know, you can't sleep on this, especially if you have a family history.
oh my gosh.
And if this is a new technology, you know, why wouldn't you want to put it in your arsenal, you know, at least to give you peace of mind too. You know, I mean, my mom had breast cancer. I'm not thrilled about the possibility of even remotely that happening to me. So to do the Grail and get a clean blood test was very reassuring.
So does insurance pay for it? How much does it cost? Like, what are the details?
So yeah, the cost is around $1,000. Probably varies depending on the provider. Insurance doesn't cover it right now.
Right.
So this would be an out-of-pocket expense. But again, as we've talked about some of the
It's a lot of data for $1,000.
Yeah.
Especially if you're the right risk profile.
Yeah. And you know, the other thing is the accuracy of it. They've designed it to be what we call specific and sensitive. When we talk about a lot of these tests, whether it's a strep test here in the office or a Grail Gallery test, you want it to be as sensitive and specific as possible, and you can kind of talk about that as well. And it's simple. I mean, you don't have to fast. You just pop in for a blood test. We send it off to the lab. They analyze it. And, you know, I was kind of expecting more of a, yay, you don't have cancer, but it just comes back and says not detected.
No.
So
Matter of fact,
it's
it
kind
says
of underwhelming.
No cancer signal detected.
No cancer signal detected. So great. Moving on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think those are clearly the advantages. I want to talk a little bit about some of the limitations,
Yeah.
potentially disadvantages, some things to consider, which is why it's not like everybody should run out and do this. Look, it's a test, and all tests have inherent imperfections, which is why it's very important to pursue tests that give the most upside with the least amount of downside. Look, I mean, I don't think $1,000 is too much to gain this kind of information for anyone who has the right risk or concern. But $1,000 for some people might be cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
So there is, I would say, a limitation to this is there is an investment, and there's no sign of insurance paying for this in the near future. You would hope that as this becomes more widely accepted, the data becomes even stronger and stronger, and the market pressures are what they are, that insurance companies would begin to adopt this into their preventative. You and I don't deal in the world of insurance, which is such a blessing, but like you would hope that eventually that would happen. But right now that is not the case. This is going to be an individual's investment. I think that's a limitation, something to consider.
Yep.
I think really before doing this, the number one thing I feel, and the one thing I really stress with all of my individual patients before we do this, is there's a real downside, and that is there is a 1 in 200 risk for a false positive. Well, what does that mean? That means you take the test, it says you have a cancer signal, but you don't have cancer. Well, that would be a stressful thing.
It would be.
And I be honest, I really push their data team, their scientists, to help me understand what a positive means. And I spent a few weeks really thinking about this, and ultimately I came down to, I don't love the fact that 1 in 200 people who get this test are going to get a positive and ultimately not have a cancer. And we're going to go through all of this, all of the pain and the suffering and the stress and the fear, but nothing is going to come up. On the other side, out of those 200 people, there's 199 people who didn't know they had cancer, but now they do.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty compelling position. And I think that as long as you go into this knowing that there is a 1 in 200 chance that you might have a positive, and we may not be able to find anything, it could mean one of three things, or maybe more. I can only think of three. One is that it's just wrong.
Yeah.
Just a limitation of the technology to not be perfect, because perfection is an illusion anyway. It could be that it's so friggin' accurate that it's finding it less than 1 millimeter or 1.5 millimeters in size of a tumor, where standard imaging, even MRI, because I think MRI can only get down to about 1 millimeter. So it may be super duper early. And what was the third? I've spaced on what the other third thing. Oh, the third might be to be determined, which I think Grail has done a great job and come in and help me if I'm misstating, but my understanding of their position on this currently as of summer of 22, that if you get a false positive, they will pay for subsequent repeat testing at no cost.
That is correct.
Which I thought was a very honorable thing to do to stand by their technology.
Yeah. So not only, I mean, they have a protocol that we can follow,
I think the last vulnerability that I can think of that's worth sharing is there is no recommendation currently on how often to do it.
Yeah.
The answer is I have no idea.
Yeah.
Practically speaking, I'm marching this out one by one by one by one. Who is the person? What is the family history? What is the risk profile? What are their behaviors? How concerned are we? If it's just we want to touch and see, maybe it's every 3 to 5 years. If it's somebody with a super strong family history, my wife, we're going to do it annually.
Yeah.
Until further notice.
Yep.
Along with other surveillance, we're doing ultrasounds, we're doing other things. But I think how often you do it needs to be a discussion with your provider as well.
Yeah.
Not just should I do it.
Right.
I think the bottom line is this, Jen, and I think we can wrap this up and put a bow on this episode by just saying Cancer is a massive deal, and everyone knows it. I'm glad that we put a little bit of data and number around this to really anchor. This is a major thing. Number 2 killer of humans, and 7 out of 10 of this killer don't have screening tests.
So you must take an offensive
You have to go
mindset.
on offense,
You have
or
to.
you are playing with a statistical roulette.
Yeah.
That you will get it and you will catch it late and you will have a bad outcome. If you go on defense here, you're playing with, when I catch it, if I catch it, it will be late.
Yeah.
And I can't rest with that.
No.
As much as I don't ever want to find it,
Yeah.
if I have to march through cancer personally or with my members, I want to do it early, so we have time, because speed is everything.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal, number 1. Number 2, don't stop doing all of this. It's not that they're bad. It's just that they're incomplete.
Yeah.
Do all the standard recommendations of screening. And if you have a unique story, if there's an element of your story that makes you want to do it early, try to build a case for that so that insurance can pay for it. If not, find a way to get that screening so that you feel comfortable that you're doing all that you can. And another plug for Find Your Team. If you feel like you don't have an environment where you can have these conversations, you have to find someone else.
Yeah.
If you're shooed away and poo-pooed and silenced and there's no conversation and my way or the highway, that's likely not a great fit for you.
Yeah.
You need to find that person, whoever it is. And then the last thing is, this Gallery blood biopsy cancer screening is on the market. It is available. It deserves some attention. It deserves some conversation if someone listening to this is interested. There are lots of benefits. There are a handful of drawbacks that you need to get your head around before you embark on this journey. But I'm really excited. You know, it's early,
Yeah.
right? It's super, super early in this technology, but it's very promising. You and I, thankfully, have not had to walk out a positive test yet.
Right.
It's all been puppy dogs and rainbows so far.
But we will.
But when you hunt, you find things.
That's right.
And so we'll probably create some content at some point in the future once we navigate some of the, like, well, here's how it happens if you, like, but we don't have that yet.
Yeah.
Give us some of your final thoughts on this topic. Just whatever is on your mind right now.
Yeah, if I could leave you with anything, it's don't ignore symptoms. You know, if something doesn't feel right, if you don't feel right, you know, talk to your healthcare provider about it. Be honest about your family history.
Yes.
Dig into that. Ask your parents, ask your grandparents if they're still alive. Know that, you know. I wish my grandparents were still alive to kind of dig into that a little bit more. Hopefully your parents know about their family history, but it is important, and it's important to share with your healthcare provider. And then if you are behind on your screening tests, or you're kind of wavering on getting them, talk to your healthcare provider about your fears and your apprehensions too, and have them help you walk through that. But don't delay in getting it, because like we said at the beginning, you probably all know somebody that has had to walk through cancer, and it's just not great. So
No, never. It's never great, but it's especially bad when it's late.